LETTER the 41st of Life in Mexico. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Life in Mexico by Francis Calderon de la Barca. LETTER the 41st. Gambling. Fête at San Agustin. Breakfast at San Antonio. Report. Cockfight. Ladies. Private gambling. Havaca. The Calvario. Bonnets. Dinner. Evening ball. Mingling of classes. Copper tables. Dresses and decorations. Indian bankers. Male and female. Decorum habit. Holders of banks. Female gambler. Robbery. Anecdote. Bet. Casa de Moneda. Leave San Angel. Celebration. Address. Cross and diploma. Reply. Presentation of a sword. Discourses and addresses. Reflections. 10th June. 1 year since I last wrote of San Agustin. An entire year has fled swiftly away on rushing pinions to add its unit to the rolling century. And again on a bright morning in June we set off for the hospitable San Antonio, where we were invited to breakfast and to pass the night on the second day of the fête. We found a very brilliant party assembled, the family with all its branches, the ex Minister Cuevas with his handsome sister-in-law, La Güera Rodriguez, with one of her beautiful granddaughters, daughter of the Marquis of G e, now making her first appearance in Mexico, and various other agreeable people. The first day of the fête a rumor was afloat that an attack was to be made on the banks by the federal party, that they expected to procure the sinews of war to the extent of $1,000,000, and then intended to raise a grito in Mexico, taking advantage of the temporary absence of the president and his officers. The plan seemed rather feasible, and the report, true or false, was current yesterday, but if there was any truth in it, the discovery has been made in time, for nothing has occurred. San Agustin appeared even gayer and even more crowded than it was last year. We spent the day at the E.S. and went with them to a box in the plaza to see the cockfight, which I had no particular pleasure, I must confess, in witnessing again, but went for the sake of those who had not seen it before. The general coup d'ceil was exceeding gay, and the improvement in the dress of the ladies since last year very striking. There were neither diamonds nor pearls among the most fashionable. The bonnets were chiefly Parisian, as were many of the gowns. One box looked a veritable parterre of flowers. The ladies of our party wore dresses and bonnets as simple, fresh, and elegant as could be seen in any part of the world. A young and titled heiress, newly arrived from her distant estates, wore pink satin with a white hat and feathers, and we observed that according to the ancient San Agustin fashion, she changed her dress 4 or 5 times a day. But the ladies may dress and may smile and may look their very best, they are little thought of this day in comparison with the one all-powerful, all-pervading object. It is even whispered that one cause of the more than usual crowd at San Agustin this year is that many failures are expected in mercantile houses, and that the heads of these houses or their agents are here on the desperate hope of retrieving their falling fortunes. A good deal of play on a small scale goes on in the private houses among those who do not take much part in the regular gambling, but all are interested more or less, even strangers, even ladies, even ourselves. Occasional news is brought in, and received with deep interest of the state of the banks, of the losses or gains of the different individuals, or of the result of the vacas, a sort of general purse into which each puts in 2 or 3 ounces, by different stragglers from the gambling houses, who have themselves only ventured a few ounces, and who prefer the society of ladies to that of the Monte players. These are generally foreigners, and chiefly English. We found the road to the Calvario, where as usual there was a ball in the afternoon, blocked up with carriages, and the hill itself covered with gay figures, who were dancing as well as the tremendous crowd would permit. This was really tolerably republican. The women generally were dressed as the better classes of Mexicans used to be, years ago, and not so many years neither, and as many in the country still are, in blonde dresses with very short petticoats, open silk stockings, and white satin shoes, and such a collection of queer bonnets has probably never been seen since the days when les Angleses pour rire first set foot on Gaelic shores. Some were like small steeples, others resembled helmets, some were like sugar loaves, and most seemed to have been set on for convenience sake all the way out. Amidst these were a good sprinkling of pretty herbalds and Paris dresses, but they belonged to the more fashionable classes. The scene was amusing from its variety, but we did not remain long, as it threatened rain. As we looked back, the crowd on the hill presented the appearance of a bed of butterflies dancing with black ants. We turned to the Blanks' to dinner, which was very handsome and entirely French. There were about 28 persons at table; some of them looked as if they had rather lost than otherwise. After dinner, music and conversation on the events and probabilities of the day, till it was time to dress for the ball at the plaza. We, however, preferred going to a box, which saves the trouble of dressing, besides being de mucho tono, very fashionable; but when we arrived, not a box was to be had. The crowd was so great, and there were so many people of tono, besides ourselves, who had preferred doing the same thing, so we were obliged to content ourselves with retreating to a third row of benches on the floor, after persuading at least a dozen of very good-natured women to turn out in order to let us in. We were afterwards joined by the Minister and his wife. The ball looked very gay, and was prodigiously crowded, and exceedingly amusing. There were people of all classes, modistes and carpenters, shop boys, tailors, hatters, and hosiers, mingled with all the haut ton of Mexico. Every shop boy considered himself entitled to dance with every lady, and no lady considered herself as having a right to refuse him, and then to dance with another person. The Señora de , a most high-bred and dignified person, danced with a stable boy in a jacket and without gloves, and he appeared particularly gratified at the extraordinary opportunity thus afforded him of holding her white gloves in his brown paws. These fellows naturally select the first ladies as their partners, and strange as it may seem, there is nothing in their behaviour that the most fastidious can complain of. They are perfectly polite, quiet, and well conducted, and what is more remarkable, go through a quadrille as well as their neighbours. The ball was quietness itself until near the end, when the wind instruments were suddenly seized with a fit of economy, the time they were paid for having probably expired, and stopped short in the midst of a waltz, upon which the gentlemen waltzers shouted "Viento! Viento!" at the full extent of their voices, clapping their hands, refusing to dance, and entirely drowning the sound of some little jingling guitars, which were patiently twanging on, until the hired sons of Aeolus had to resume their labours. There were some pretty faces among the secondary class of small shopkeepers, but their beauty is not striking, and takes a long time to discover, especially fagoties as they are in their overloaded dresses. Amongst the handsomest of the higher classes were the Señora C s and a daughter of the Marquis G e. On the third night of the fête, C n and I having left the ballroom about 10 o'clock, we walked out in the direction of the copper tables which filled the middle of the square, and were covered with awnings. It is a sight that, once seen, can never be forgotten. Nothing but the pencil of Hogarth or the pen of Bose could do justice to the various groups there assembled. It was a gambling fête champêtre, conducted on the most liberal scale. On each table were great mountains of copper, with an occasional sprinkling of silver. There was a profusion of evergreens, small tin lamps dripping with oil, and sloping tallow candles shedding grease upon the board. Little ragged boys, acting as waiters, were busily engaged in handing around pulque and chia in cracked tumblers. There was, moreover, an agreeable tinkling produced from several guitars, and even the bankers condescended to amuse their guests with soothing strains. The general dress of the company consisted of a single blanket, gracefully disposed in folds about the person, so as to show various glimpses of a bronze skin. To this some added a pair of Mexican pantaloons, and some a shirt of a doubtful colour. There were many with large hats, most of which had crowns or parts of crowns, but all affording free entrance to the fresh air. Generally speaking, however,